Welcome in, everyone, on a Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. It's Ohio State Buckeyes live for a 47th consecutive week. We've got Tony Gerdeman on the line from the Ozone, and, of course, Mr. Steve Hillwagon from Bucknuts on 247 Sports, senior Big Ten writer right there. How are we doing today?
Great.
Pretty good.
Good. It's nice and sunny here. Hopefully it is there in the Buckeye State. Not today.
No, three. In fact, we got a front coming from the Midwest that's going to dump a bunch more rain. We're saturated here in central Ohio, don't need any more rain, and looks like we'll probably get another inch or two of rain here today, possibly. So, yeah, and the other thing is it's been very cold. North of here, they actually are having snow flurries today as well. So we are ready for spring. Of course, what's famously going to happen here in Ohio is it's going to go from 40 and 50 straight up to 70 and 80 probably within a couple weeks. And, you know, it's just weird. You say, well, we never have spring. It kind of goes from late winter into early summer sometimes. But that's our weather here in Ohio. It could be 30 or it could be 80. You just don't know one day to the next.
In May, you can have the heat and the air conditioning on, you know, throughout the span of the month. So,
yeah. And you can also have the heat and the air conditioning on in the same day.
Same day, yeah.
They can plummet to 40 at night after a 75-degree day, that sort of thing. So the better weather is going to help me through this. I know that for sure, because when we get some good weather on those days, hey, get outside a little bit, get some fresh air. But when it's 38 and gloomy, there's not a whole lot of incentive to do that. All right, folks out there, of course, bring your comments, your questions, and your debate topics to the live chat, and we will get them to Steve and Tony and myself. And, of course, like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe. We have tons of NFL draft coverage headed your way. We've already released player profiles on a ton of players throughout the country. And so please check those out. And, of course, we'll have NFL draft coverage coming your way. We also did a conference realignment conversation just a few days ago as well. All right, on the Buckeye recruiting trail, the news is good, and it gets better and better, and it continues. I got to tell you guys that I think I made mention of this a couple of weeks ago, that I bring on other writers that cover other teams, and they look at me when I ask about recruiting updates like I've got three heads or something, because they just figure, well, it's dead, it's shut down, nothing's going on right now. But not with Mr. Ryan Day and that stellar staff. Tunmisi ADELEYE is what we're going with, I believe. I think Tony's approved that. Always wanted to be a Buckeye, at least since that 2015 national championship game, a Texas native, Steve.
Yeah, it's crazy. Ohio State.
Read your book is probably what happened.
Yeah. It's crazy. The rich just keep getting richer. Another defensive end, 6'3", 240 pounds, out of, as you say, originally Texas, but playing at IMG Academy. And Ohio State's done a good job down there. I know LeJon Cavazos was a guy there this past year that they took in the 2020 class. And now for 2021, they've got ADELEYE. And Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, all those schools wanted this guy. Everybody who competes for a national championship every year or is in the running was after this guy. So that'll tell you you're recruiting the right guys. Number 41 in the composite. He's their fifth top 50 prospect in this class, and it is entirely possible that they could still sign another 2 to 3 or 4 more guys out of the top 50 in this class for what appears is going to be the number one recruiting class in the country this year. I wonder how anybody could possibly outpoint these guys when it's all said and done. So they'll have spots that will open up later. When you think about guys like Sean Wade going pro, a couple of the other guys that my brain is not functioning properly at this point, but my thought was they'd have at least 3 guys leaving early for the NFL, opening up scholarship spots. So, yeah, it's going to be another great recruiting class for Ryan Day. And there are people, I saw one post on the Michigan message board that, what are people in the ACC going to do about Clemson? What are people in the Big Ten going to do about Ohio State? Because nobody in either league looks like they're going to have the personnel to touch either of those programs anytime soon.
Yeah, Steve mentions the Big Ten. Ohio State right now with 11 top 100 players in that composite, and the rest of the Big Ten has 4.
Oof.
Two of them belong to Michigan. I think one to Maryland, one to Penn State.
And they're not going to play as an all-star team, are they, Tony? They're going to play as individual colleges against Ohio State?
That is correct. One school at a time. Yeah, they do not mix and draft.
That's actually a good idea.
There you go. We should make that's a show right there. We can draft an opposing team to face the Buckeyes.
I know who would coach it. 44-time Big Ten Coach of the Year, Kirk Ferentz. He'd be the
I know who wouldn't, Jim Harbaugh, because it would be a Big Ten championship game. So, but and then the rivals rankings, Ohio State has 12 commits in the top 103, and the rest of the Big Ten has like 5. 3 of them are Michigan commits. So it's the gap that we've talked about in the past continues to widen, at least in recruiting. We'll see if it means anything on the field. It tends to mean stuff on the field, and this is Tunmise ADELEYE is the 3rd top 100 defensive lineman committed to Ohio State right now. Already got Jack Sawyer out of Central Ohio, who's a 5-star top 4 player, and then Mike Hall, another Ohioan defensive tackle, top 100 guy, top 10 defensive tackle. So that's Larry Johnson doing what he does, and I think Greg Madison was also in on ADELEYE. So just more of the same. It had been a while since a commitment, so it had been almost 3 weeks now. So we were wondering had Ryan Day lost his mojo, but apparently there's still a little bit of mojo left.
I got to tell you that, of course, they're wrestling. When we talk about top 50 and 100 and 150 players in the nation, we know who they're wrestling them away from. These kids must have I don't want to say better perspective, but a broader, maybe a wiser and more in-depth perspective on what's going on in college football than much of my viewership, because they think that 2014 national championship was like decades ago, and who would want to touch Ohio State if you can go to Clemson or Alabama? But these kids are obviously seeing some worth there in Columbus.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm writing a daily series about past recruiting classes, and I'm up to 2003. They signed a guy named Dante Whitner, who was a big-time defensive back out of Cleveland, Glenville. And they had just won the national championship, and they really didn't parlay it into a lot of success in the 2003 class. In fact, a funny story that I'm writing about, when they were parading from the airport back to campus, they came through downtown and people were on the sidewalks and cheering. Channel 4 was showing this live on television, and they came on and said that Prescott Burgess from Warren Harding had just committed to Michigan, like within 24 hours of Ohio State winning the national championship. And the other story is Jim Tressel on signing day, when he announced that they got Dante Whitner, said that Dante Whitner remembered as a kid, he had seen Ohio State dominate and win the Rose Bowl in 1996, 97, 98, 99 when he was younger, elementary school, middle school. And that made the impression on him from that early stage that he wanted to be an Ohio State player. So I think in some respect, what you'll see is, or what we have seen is that this is something that's ingrained in kids when they're younger, and then when they get the chance to become a college athlete, like we just heard here with ADELEYE, he was predisposed to like Ohio State at an early age, and that impacted him. So I think now what you have is kind of a snowball effect where they get great quarterbacks, they're going to get great wide receivers. They get great offensive linemen, they're going to get great running backs, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it kind of just feeds off of itself at this point for Ohio State.
And I recall Sean Wade committing to Ohio State when they were right after they won their national title, that 2014 season. And it might have been that same night. And he committed and stayed, and he was a 2017 class member, so he committed well before he signed. So yeah, it's I don't know if it hurts when you hear like recruits talking about, yeah, I grew up watching the Buckeyes win a national title as a kid way back in 2014, and it's like, no, come on, you can't say way back in 2014. It was just a few years ago. Cut us some slack. But they were like 11, 12 years old. But it sets that, a little bit of inception in their brain, and it just puts that seed in there. And That's why, anytime you can make these not these BCS bowls, but any of these big bowls, and that's why Notre Dame likes to go out to California. That's why Ohio State likes to go out to California, just to be seen, plant these seeds, and then maybe in 6 or 7 years, you can go sign some trees out there.
The theory, when cable really expanded and the college football schedule went crazy from basically noon every Saturday until 2:00 in the morning, and then the Thursday and Friday games that used to be single games, and now you're seeing 4 and 5 matchups, was this would even the playing field. That because more programs got to get national attention, that this would even the playing field because anybody can be on TV. But it's done the exact opposite for whatever reason, or maybe that's had no factor in it at all.
I think it's helped everybody, but the haves will always be helped. Anything you give them, they can use, and they're always one of the reasons I think they are the haves is because they push every limit, and anything you give them, they're going to put to good use. And it's helped Boise States and those, those types of schools, UCF, and just being seen. Even the MAC schools are getting seen more. I mean, heck, the MACtion everybody talks about now. But the reason that the haves are the haves is because they make use of every outlet or anything you want to give them. And, they're doing pretty well with that. And, we'll see what happens when there's scholarship changes that come, from the coronavirus, how the haves will continue to make use of that stuff as well.
My theory on MACtion is that everybody knows it's going on on Tuesday and Wednesday nights and thinks it's cute, but nobody's actually watching it.
Especially when there's like a premier game and then there's a secondary game, and I agree. The audience is split enough, and then you're splitting the MAC audience as well.
Yeah, and there's a brand new Grey's Anatomy on over on ABC or a Chicago PD over on NBC on a Wednesday night. I'm sorry, that's Nathan Rourke and the boys, or whoever, I'm sorry. I'm going to be watching my first run network programming over on the other channel, but I thought Ohio University had a team last year or the year before that I thought could win the MAC and even compete, as we saw Western Michigan did with Fleck a few years ago. To be that team to make the New Year's Six, you have to go undefeated and hope that there's no other Group of 5 team that goes undefeated from the MAC to be able to do that. But they just seem to cannibalize one another, and they all end up like 6-4 or something at the end, and nothing to make your socks go up and down a whole lot, it seems, out of that league, other than what Fleck was able to do. And what was interesting was they played Wisconsin in the bowl game, and they lost like 34-20 or something. It was a close game, and his first Minnesota team got blown out by Wisconsin. And of course, they beat him, I think, the second year at Wisconsin, but and then lost to him this past year, the third year. But his Western Michigan team gave Wisconsin a better run than his first Minnesota team did, which I thought was kind of interesting.
The MAC has had a decent run against the Big Ten, and when I mean a decent run, I mean winning about 10% of the games. Then
Purdue's always good to doink one off to Eastern Michigan, and
Eastern Michigan, I think, knocked out Illinois last year. Purdue seems to take one on the chin about every other year. Northwestern, even the year that they won the Big Ten Western Division and went 8-1 in the Big Ten, lost to Akron. So there's a couple a year. There's about a 10%. I think it's about a 90-10 ratio still, but obviously those are the games that stand out.
Toledo got Michigan back in 2008, along with everybody else.
Toledo.
It's been close for the Buckeyes a few times. Bowling Green's given them a game against Tressel and the boys in like 2003. That was a good game. There was a game against John Cooper's like 92 team against Bowling Green. That was kind of an ugly like 14-6 game. But the Buckeyes have yet to get clipped against the MAC. All right,
Yeah.
talking Ohio State football here each and every week. We get Steve Hellwagon on the line from Bucknuts, and also, of course, Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone. And Philip, please, we enjoy the questions, but my goodness, after the president's speech, I think it's going to take more than like a 5-minute phone call for those guys to figure out what the plan's going to be going forward. So we are far, far away from unveiling. And of course, there needs to be cooperation from the Big Ten, the NCAA, everybody else involved.
The interesting thing about that is the NCAA is going to have to make the rules even for everybody. So if, like, just thinking about visiting, recruiting visits, like Ohio State could be, the way I read it, phase 2 is when recruiting visits could open back up because that's non-essential travel. But the NCAA is not going to allow Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin to travel if Florida can't. So it's almost as if the entire nation will have to be in phase 2 before any recruiting trips open up. And then, even beyond that, in terms of getting fans in the stands back in phase 3, I think that could occur without having it nationwide, perhaps, because that's not really a recruiting advantage. But it may just be a disadvantage for the states who aren't able to open up their stadiums. I don't know how they're going to be able to, I guess, keep it fair for everyone, because that's something that Ryan Day has been talking about. This all sucks, but as long as it's fair for everybody, we're dealing with it. Once they get into phase 2s for each state in phase 3, there's going to be some, I don't want to say unfair, but odd and uneven situations.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Tony. I think we're seeing some positive movement that they're going to start moving some things in a direction to where we can do at least a few more things. But I think it's important to understand that they're still just talking about no more than 10 people, even in phase 1 at any kind of a particular gathering or something. Like, keep it very small. And I think it's going to be baby steps. But nice that they're finally taking the first baby step towards some type of normality, or however you want to put it. I don't want to get political or anything like that. I just feel like cautious is the best way that we can go with this. And it has been very unfortunate, I think, for a lot of people. And, I guess we just have to continue to stay the course and do what the experts believe is best. And, we're starting to hear people that we know that have been afflicted with this. And I'm sure some people know people who've passed away from it. And I'm lucky in that sense that I personally don't believe I've known anybody who's died from this yet. But, on a personal level, but I am, interested to see, if we can open up a few things, if we can maintain a hold on it. And I think that's the biggest thing that we have going forward. And I feel bad for everybody who's been afflicted by it.
I will say, since Kevin Noon isn't here, I'll go ahead and answer for him regarding one thing. And even if it's just 10 people limited, that does mean that the Miami Hurricanes can have all of their fans in a stadium.
I love those pictures that have been going around, how some schools have been training for this moment for a long time. I mean, those Miami high shots at Joe Robbie, pro player, Land Shark, Dolphins, whatever else it's ever been called, Sun Life, Hard Rock. I mean, it's had like 12 different names, that poor building. But, those high shots that they show from those Miami home games, like Bethune-Cookman and some of those games, when there is like less than nobody there, it's pretty funny.
See, I was thinking that was going to usher in MACtion on a Tuesday night before anything else, by the looks of some of those stadium shots.
Yeah. We're talking like very small stadiums with very few people, like 3,000 or whatever at an Eastern Michigan game. A few years back, they were talking about dropping down Eastern Michigan and schools like that because they weren't getting enough fan support in their games. And now, one of the things that Governor Mike DeWine, Ohio's governor, was talking about yesterday in this rollout of reopening the state is making sure that people are confident that things are safe. And right now, does anybody want to go and sit next to somebody else at a stadium? So as they roll things out gradually, they have to reassure, like each step of the way, it is now safe for this. It is now safe to be in a group of 50 people. It is now safe to be in a group of 5,000. And I think even at that point, people are still going to be exercising masks and things like that. And the first Ohio State game where it's everybody is free to come in. It's normally maybe 107,000 right now with seating capacity. What would we expect them to have at that first game where everybody can return? I mean, do you expect 100,000? Is it 70,000? Is it 80,000? I don't know.
So if you've got 5,000 people in an auditorium versus 100,000 people at a football stadium, so I'm thinking that the impact beyond that gathering in that day is exponential with the 100,000 people that can go affect a zillion people versus the 5,000. But in and of itself, when you're tightly packed in an auditorium with 5,000 people, what's the difference between 5,000 and 100,000? I got to think maybe the consideration is beyond that gathering. It's the exponential possible effect.
I don't think it takes long for that 5,000 to catch up with the 100,000 now, because it is such a widespread thing. I'm just wondering, because my wife and I are talking when they open up the theaters, are we going to go to a movie theater? I doubt it. Not for a while, or a restaurant or whatever. Got no problem with takeout, and we still do that. But, people have to be reassured. And even after that, they need to continue to be reassured. And after they see 6 months after things are open, that it's been okay.
Absolutely. Ohio State fans are looking for nicks and gaps and just minor little weaknesses on this team somewhere. An NBA fan believes he's found one, that a quick twitch guy is needed to replace Chase Young, I'm thinking. And Landon Jackson's a prospect out of Texas himself, Texarkana. So since the Buckeyes, I believe, have the number 1 rated and the 4th rated, I think, weak side defensive ends, I guess they need the number 3 guy, Landon Jackson.
Well, I mean, the whole weak side, strong side, I wouldn't get too hung up on that. I see Landon Jackson's listed at 6'6", 240. He's a lanky guy. Ohio State has guys like that already, like Javonte Jean-Baptiste is, 6'4", 6'5", 250. And they'll build them up even more. But, then they also, you're looking at Baron Browning dropping down a little bit and rushing the passer. I don't know that Ohio State really gets too hung up on the strong side, weak side stuff anymore, because they just rotate guys. They put a bunch of guys in there, and Jonathan Cooper, I think, is a quick twitch guy who hasn't really produced in terms of sacks. But there's other guys out there. Jazion Harris out of Erasmus Hall in Brooklyn, where Ohio State has had some success with Curtis Samuel and Matthew Jones. He's another, I guess, skinny defensive end, if that's what we're looking at. But I don't know that they're – I don't know what the chances are with Landon Jackson. He's another guy that everybody's after.
We talk Ohio State football with these two, and typically Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove. You got Steve Hellwagon front and center in the middle right there from Bucknuts, and Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone. Please check out their work. It is stellar. So you get a slice, a taste right here for our 1 hour each and every week, but certainly the in-depth knowledge, information, and insight into everything concerning Ohio State athletics and specifically football, you can catch with Tony on the Ozone and Steve on Bucknuts. And of course, again, join us each and every week. The reason you subscribe is you get the notifications. If you hit the bell, keep that on. You get the notifications and know when we're going live with Ohio State and everybody else throughout the week. And my favorite salute each and every week comes from Pinero 5 Piru, the big Michigan fan. Yo, salute to everyone here. Go Blue, Michigan. Salute. I just admire the fortitude and the consistency of Pinero showing up each and every week and giving us the Michigan salute.
100%.
Yes. The Clemson and Ohio State positions in each conference can be likened, and there's a correlation there, but certainly the Big Ten much stronger behind Ohio State than Clemson. I don't think there's a debate about that. The Florida schools need to step up in the ACC, but other than that, Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan, Iowa, much stronger than anything that they've got currently going in the ACC.
I thought the Big Ten, what they needed to do back when Urban Meyer came on, and or even before, is they need to get better coaches. And I think they've done that, and they've continued to do that. I think the ACC now needs to do the same thing. When Mac Brown comes in, and he's already making waves and doing well in recruiting, and your conference loses a guy like Jimbo Fisher, that hurts as well. So I think what the Big Ten did is Urban Meyer forced everybody to get better, and teams did, programs did. And Dabo is going to do the same thing to the ACC, either get better or get way, way left behind. And then it's up to them. Are they happy just breaking in the money and losing? Or are they going to put money forth and try to be something with it? Like Purdue could have just cashed checks and been happy, but they've spent for their coach, rightly or wrongly. But they are trying to keep up, and I think that's what the ACC needs to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at the money that's being tossed around for assistant coaches, for facilities, for head coaches, for recruiting budgets, and everything else, it is crazy the amount of money that is spent to put these teams on the field. And so there are some schools that make the commitment to compete for a national championship, and other schools that simply don't. And what we're seeing is truly a haves and have-nots, unlike anything we've ever seen. I mean, when Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, have pretty much dominated the landscape here over the last 6 or 7 years in terms of championship games and playoffs and however, national championships and however you want to put it. So, LSU had a guy fall in their lap, and really it was a great team. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they've got more guys probably going to be drafted in this draft than anybody. They have more guys, I think, than anybody at the combine. I know that. So, I think, there'll be some one-offs now and then, but Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State are consistently at the top, and Oklahoma is consistently the best in their conference, the Big 12, to fill another spot. So, yeah, it is interesting to say the least.
And this is an analogy I use all the time in various things I'm writing, is like Steve's talking about Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson. If you look at it in Wheel of Fortune terms, that's, those schools are the R, S, T, L, and E. And then LSU would be like, okay, now you give us 3 other letters you want in there, and LSU would be what. But it's like Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson those are the givens, and now give us a couple others that might get in there. And until there's more of those givens, right now, who contends, who will push Clemson? And the people pushing Clemson right now is Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson, basically. And that was when Urban Meyer came to Ohio State, he looked at Alabama. That was the target. Then eventually it's just, once you've got the culture, you push yourself.
Yeah, and that's what it's been. Certainly, Georgia, from a talent standpoint, is right there. They have yet to break through, except for the 1 year in the SEC, and came within a play seconds of winning a national championship. But the elite is the 3 or 4 or 5, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if LSU is a one-year wonder. We know from a talent perspective they're not. They litter the NFL with as many players as just about anyone, but they need that one guy at quarterback. Now we'll see if they can replace Joe Burrow with a guy that, if the next kid throws 40 touchdowns, which would be 2/3 of what Burrow threw, 40 touchdown passes in a season, 60 touchdown passes in a season. That's still, I shake my head over that number. Philip is referring on the screen to, so we had a bit of a misfire here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I know you all know it as a very finely tuned machine, but we accidentally posted a few videos. So I had posted them privately a few weeks ago and put them dates in the future and forgot about them. And then all of a sudden they're springing forth and people are watching them. So about about 1,500 people took in a couple realignment posts where I had realigned some conferences and then I pulled them back. And so that's all going to be unveiled here. And when I re-release the Big Ten realignment, we'll run that by Steve and Tony and get their thoughts.
Well, nothing is going to suit people that they do. They took 20 years of data and mashed it together and gave you legends and leaders with no geographical stance to it, really. And that didn't suit people. They didn't like it. It wasn't really the names. They just didn't like it competitively, I guess. I don't know. It makes the most sense to do it geographically, if you even have to do it. The Big 12 now has gone division free, which guarantees you the two best teams in the league will play each other at the end. And as we've seen, sometimes the team who had the best record in the regular season doesn't win the championship because maybe they beat the other team in the regular season. The other team wins the game in the championship game. So that can be kind of a tough result for the team that won the regular season matchup and even the regular season championship. And then number 2 comes by and whacks them in the championship game and gets to go to the playoff for the big bowl game. So I'm not sure whether I like either. Maybe divisionless is the best way that the Big Ten should go, and just keep protected rivals and rotate the rest of your schedule. Keep maybe 2 protected rivals and play 1 at home every year and 1 on the road every year, and then rotate the rest of it. Might be the best way to do it. I don't know, but divisions, the Big 12 is kind of showing that divisions are kind of an antiquated notion, I think. But when you've had some teams that have pushed Clemson in their division, and then Clemson goes off and plays like a 7-5 team from the other division. Well, that team from their division, was 9-3 or 10-2 and didn't get a sniff. So I don't know. You can't make everybody happy. The Mountain West and the Western Athletic Conference combined into one huge 16-team thing, and what happened was at the end of the year, there was one champion and 15 teams standing there holding the bag that didn't win it. And, with 16 teams in your league, you're not going to win the championship very often if there's parity in that league. I mean, Boise State comes along and wins whatever league they're in every year, but it was hard to keep everybody happy the bigger these mega leagues have become. So, how about this? Go get you a team and get better. Focus on that rather than the format. I don't know.
I think the format in the Big Ten is just fine. I wouldn't have necessarily said that a few years ago, so I don't want to get caught into what a lot of people do, and that's that they fix last year's problem, and that's their format, and they don't look at the broad landscape, understanding that it's cyclical to an extent. I think the elite's the elite and probably will continue to be, and the bottom dwellers are the bottom dwellers, but the teams in the middle tend to change to a certain extent. But with Michigan State faltering, in Minnesota, I don't want to put too much on one season, but possibly elevating. And Nebraska with the probably best potential to elevate out of the middling teams, that it's not an East-West issue anymore. I think the East and West are pretty comparable. It's an Ohio State and everybody else issue.
So how do you fix it?
You just let it play out. But in regards to East and West, Wisconsin, Minnesota, potentially Nebraska and Iowa, not even talking about Northwestern and Purdue at this point, which are decent programs. It's a pretty deep, thick Western division. They just don't have the one elite team, but there's only 3 or 4 of those across the country.
I like what the West does in the fact that each year a different team, 4 or 5 of those teams could come out of there. And if things go right and they have the right schedule, they could go undefeated in that division and come into the Big Ten championship game with 1 or no losses, with a chance to make the playoffs. That happened with Illinois a few years back. Wisconsin was 1 game away from playing in the playoffs, so, or at least being undefeated or 1 loss and being considered. So
I think you wanted to say Iowa there, Tony. I was searching for that Illinois year.
No. Definitely Iowa. I think 2015.
Sure.
Um, the 2032 Illinois team will also be their first opportunity to make the playoffs. But, and we keep waiting for Nebraska. Minnesota is on the uptick. I think for those coaches, they all feel like they have an opportunity to make the playoffs if things go well, because there is some parity, but you get that right mix of seniors and that right one playmaker, and things start happening. You get that magical season, and then then you still have to beat Ohio State or Penn State, at the end, and that's but I think maybe you should have to make the playoffs.
There you go. There was an article posted on ESPN.com just the other day that I skimmed through because I don't know that it would necessarily was going to provide me with any more information, although they had a lot of player and coaches quotes, the Joshua Perrys and the Urban Meyers and some other players that were on that 2015 team. So with the NFL draft coming up this next weekend, they were highlighting that stellar 2016 draft class from Ohio State, but also parlaying that into what happened in 2015. To read the first paragraph, you would have thought that 2015 team went 7-5. But anyway, they lost the game. It was to a really good Michigan State team, not an elite team, not a team that was comparable to them talent-wise, but a team that made the playoffs and only lost one game. But we've talked about the 2015 team. But again, it was just another time or opportunity to review just the talent on that team. I saw a tweet this week, and I'll set you guys up for however you want to take the rest of this portion of the conversation. I responded to a tweet from a Clemson heckler who said, if we got the 2018 Clemson team together with the 2014 Ohio State team, what do you think it would be, like 45-0? And I quickly reminded them that, first of all, we don't know. That's one thing about these discussions. We can throw out whatever numbers we want about what the final score would be. We will never know. So let's understand that. We will never know. And then secondly, the talent on that 2014-15 team, my goodness. And I was berated for calling Michael Thomas and Ezekiel Elliott Hall of Famers. I made the disclaimer, they are on a Hall of Fame pace. I don't think that can be discounted. Zeke Elliott, I looked at the numbers. He's led the league in rushing 2 out of 4 seasons. He's led the league in yardage per game 3 out of his 4 seasons in the NFL. He's on a pace to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Michael Thomas is on a pace to be the greatest receiver in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, you make a great point. And I think, again, it's fun to have arguments like this because, as you said, we won't ever know how it could possibly turn out. But I look at these teams and you watch them. All you can go by is how they dominated the teams that they played. And again, by the end of the 2014 season, Ohio State was playing at a pretty high level. I mean, did they play at that level, when they played Virginia Tech back in week 2? No, they weren't very good at all. But by the end of the season, they were playing at an extremely high level. And so many of those young guys like Bosa and Elliott in particular were second-year players that year who were just coming into their own. And it's kind of the thing that by midway through your second year, you become a veteran player, and the team kind of grows up. And I think that is in a sense your level of play from where you are at the beginning of the season to your level of play at the end of the season. Have you improved? Are you getting better? Are you now among one of the best teams in the country? And I think no question in 2014, that's what Ohio State did. 2015, they kind of rested on their laurels. They had some off the field distractions, some different things that kind of took them out of where they could have been, what they should have been. And it's hard to repeat. We don't see very often that teams are able to repeat. Alabama's done it once or twice here recently, but otherwise it's been very difficult in college football to get a group of 19, 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old guys to stay and play at that kind of peak level over a 2 or 3 year period. It's just there's so many trappings that go along with this, things that people fall into away from the playing field that, and you have guys peel off and go to the NFL as well, key players. So it is difficult just as guys are reaching their peak that, that the team has to kind of start over and reload and rebuild. But this is what makes college football so great is the arguments, and the Ohio State people are always going to argue our team was better. The Clemson people would always argue our team, 15-0, however you want to put it, was this and that and whatever. And, good for them. And it makes for a great argument in the off season, particularly in this hiatus when we don't have a whole heck of a lot going on that we can talk about. But, as I said, I'm doing a study now going through all these recruiting classes, and Ohio State had a recruiting class in 2002 that was just something otherworldly. I mean, when you talk about, they had guys like Mike DeAndrea and Derek Morris, who were national top 100 players who never really contributed. I don't think Derek Morris ever even played it down for Ohio State. He had Prop 48 and extra benefits issues. Mike DeAndrea could never get healthy. They had two real misses there, but then you have Maurice Claret, who gave him one great year, A.J. Hawk, Bobby Carpenter,
Mike
Kudlis, Antonio Holmes, Doug Daddish, T.J. Downing. I mean, so many guys, and I haven't even mentioned Troy Smith, who they had Justin Zwick, who was the quote-unquote top career passer in Ohio and quote-unquote the guy at quarterback, and they end up ultimately turning the reins over to Troy Smith midway through their third year, and he ends up in his fifth year winning the Heisman Trophy. You just can't – there are so many variables in college football. You can never predict where the ball is headed or who's going to be that guy, because so many things can happen off the field and injury wise to take you out of whatever it is that you do. But to have a class like that, they signed like 25 guys, and they had 40 seasons of guys who started games. They had 12 guys drafted out of the 25 or 26. 4 or 5 of them were first round. So those are the kind of classes that you dream about. Ohio State is in the process in 2020 of putting together that type of a class, and I think it's going to be fun for Ohio State people over the next 5 years to see where the ball is headed.
That 2013 class, which led to the 2015 team, is also up there with Ezekiel Elliott and Joey Bosa, Darren Lee, Billy Price are both redshirt freshmen on that national championship team, Eli Apple. So there's a pretty impressive group in that class as well. The 2015 team for me, I just feel like it was just parts. And then they came in fat and happy, like Steve said. There were suspensions to start the season. You lose Tom Herman, I think, is overlooked as well. And really, people hold – you look at the talent, and, yeah, you put that team way up there. But as a team, I don't – give me the 2016 team, or especially with that pass defense that the 2016 team had, and both teams had Bosa's, so that kind of evens out there. But I just the 2015 team for me is more of a disappointment than, oh man, they would beat anybody. 2014 team, I saw what they could do, and every piece fit perfectly, and sometimes multiple pieces had to be used, like we saw at quarterback, and Ezekiel Elliott wasn't even really the full-time starting running back until about week 6. Curtis Samuel had a start as a freshman that year at running back, and Zeke, I think, had he was getting like 60 yards a game for the first 3 or 4 games because they were still trying to figure things out. And yet by the end of the season, and that's one reason why he wasn't – I don't even think he was all Big Ten that year, because he went into the playoffs with like 1,400 yards rushing or something. He wasn't an All-American. He wins the Sullivan Award as the top amateur athlete in the nation, but he doesn't have a tree in Buckeye Grove, which is pretty crazy. And I think there needs to be something for what he did at Ohio State, because I don't know if there's any better running back than Ezekiel Elliott to come through here, and for there to be no. And J.K. Dobbins, I think, is the same thing. I don't know that he had a first team All-American nod this past year, which, but that's Ohio State, and I know some people don't want to get hung up on who gets their trees for being an All-American, but I guess there's a lot of good players who don't get recognized as much as they should, or as much as, should a first-team All-American punter have a tree and Ezekiel Elliott not? Maybe that's a discussion for another day.
You're sending me to the Wayback Machine now. Like, who got All-American ahead of him in 2015 when he had 1,800 yards or whatever it was? I mean, he had another great season in 2015, although, maybe people held it against him that they lost the one game. I don't know. But for All-American running back, I would think he had to be mentioned on somebody's team that next year. I'm going to make that a project now to try and figure out who was the All-American at running back in 2015.
Well, and I know some of those teams were coming out before the playoffs, but like Saquon Barkley, Melvin Gordon and Tevin Coleman both rushed for over 2,000 yards in the Big Ten that year. So that's one reason why Elliott wasn't an All-American there.
Leonard Fournette and Derrick Henry.
Yeah, so
says here,
those
are good players. Those are good players.
Was that in 14 or 15?
15.
Yeah, Derrick Henry won the Heisman, and Fournette was the Heisman
Elliott
runner
was
most of the season.
Elliott was second team AP with Dalvin Cook that year from Florida State.
Those are some good running backs.
Yeah. Christian McCaffrey was on some teams he was picked, but primarily Fournette and Henry. Yeah.
I was a McCaffrey Heisman guy in 2015.
Michigan last Big Ten title was 2004. Is that correct?
04.
Yeah.
When the
they're
Buckeyes
setting a
sent them to
record.
Pasadena with a double-digit loss.
This is the longest route they've ever gone without winning a Big Ten championship. Is now 15 full seasons and counting, and they're certainly not going to win it this year, I wouldn't think. So, yeah.
And as you guys recall, that was quite the game in 2004 when Troy Smith had just gotten the job a few weeks earlier. He, Ginn, and Holmes just went ballistic in that game. He threw for 300 and ran for like 1-something, and they just annihilated Michigan.
Great punt return touchdown from Teddy Ginn.
83 yards, I believe.
Yeah. And that game started out with what? A touchdown pass from Troy Smith to Gonzo over Ernest Shazer, who was an All-American, and pretty much just set the tone right there. Not that, Ohio State had set the tone before against Michigan once just Jim Tressel got there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the game where they held up Michigan going into the stadium so that they could check all the bags with the dogs and everything. And Jim Tressel said that Lloyd Card complained about it. And Tressel said, well, I think we fell behind 14-0 or 14-7. So maybe we need better dogs or something.
There's a
little tweak.
After the game, I think even during
that with you.
Later that week, Lloyd Carr still wasn't happy about it. And he relayed a story of when he met Jim Tressel on the field before the game. Tressel asked him, so did you get in all right? Like knowing
that, we did not.
That he probably somebody set that up. I think a year or so ago, I emailed some people around at Ohio State asking if I could talk to whoever was in charge of that, but that has been swept under the rug and nobody has returned my calls.
That's great.
Who's in charge of the dogs? Tressel, I think we need better dogs. The one time he beat him and he just patted him on the butt dismissively on the way by. And that they shook hands and then Tressel gave him a little whack on the butt and that was that. And look, Lloyd knew that it wasn't changing after 07. He got out of there while the getting was good. So, and I think, didn't he beat Urban Meyer in his last game, the bowl game at that's the only time Meyer lost to Michigan was when he was the head coach at Florida after winning the championship the year before. And in 07, they lost to him in the bowl game, didn't they? Is that right?
That was not a very good Florida defense in 07. It got better in 08, clearly.
Yeah, high-scoring game, like a 42-35. Mike Hart ran wild in that game.
I think he fumbled twice, too, which was a rarity for him.
What's that?
I think Mike Hart fumbled twice in that game too, which was a rarity because he hardly ever fumbled.
And then Urban Meyer came back and won another national championship. He did kind of the reversal of a John Cooper, who beat Michigan at Arizona State and then couldn't beat him with Ohio State.
It's better to do it the way Urban did it.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the way Urban did it.
He got it right.
People tend to remember those. Good stuff. Tony Gerdeman on the line from the ozone.net and Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts. Ellie Shapley asking about whether in the conversations and the news conferences between Gene Smith and Ryan Day, if you guys can detect any various thoughts or differing in opinion about the way this should roll out.
Well, I think what Gene Smith said was he has a hard time imagining that they would do it without fans. Is if it's not safe to have students in, it's kind of all or nothing response, I guess. If it's not safe to have students on campus in close proximity with one another, 70,000 people on a given day, including staff and, people going from campus, over 50 to 70,000 people every day. Could you then have an empty stadium game with really, would that be safe? And I think in Gene Smith's mind, what he's always said was, until I can get a clarification from the experts on what is safe and what's not safe, it's kind of hard to picture that and predict that. I think Ryan Day is taking the more measured approach of saying, well, it's still a little ways off. If we can get everybody back here by July 15th, which is 3 months from now, it's April 17th. Okay. It's still 3 months away. Maybe there'll be some advancements. Maybe this thing will be stamped out a little bit to the point where it would be safe to go back and resume some kind of normalcy with our society. Impossible to predict the future, though. So I guess we just all need to keep an open mind is probably the best thing that we can say at this point, because I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but I think what we have on our side is time. That's what we have on our side right now, is every day it's moving one way or the other. And the more days that we can put on top of one another that it is a positive day, the better it's going to be.
And I'll just chime in on what Dr. Steve had to say. Day is basically said, any football is better than none, but only if it's safe. Gene, as Steve said, was saying, well, if it's not safe for fans, why is it safe for the players? And he also mentioned, I would have to talk to people and learn my blind spot on that. So it seems like he has some leeway that he could maybe listen to, because he did initially say, like, I thought, games with no fans, that will work. But then he began thinking more about it. And that's when you're like, well, if it's not safe for the fans, why is it safe for the players? And, then he needs to learn his blind spot, talking to the experts. And that's where it keeps going back to. They're going to rely on the experts, and that's medical experts, government experts. Day would gladly play with no fans because he wants to play. And like you said, any football is better than none. So take that for any scenario you want to throw out there. If it's playing 6 games starting in November or pushing it into the spring, any football is better than none. And I think we probably all agree with them. And yeah, you want it to be safe as possible. Remember, it's football. And how safe is it?
And of course, Ryan Day wants to play with that roster. Yeah, he wants to play football. He wants to get that team out
chance
there.
With Justin Fields. Why wouldn't you?
Yes, absolutely. Todd B., we appreciate you encouraging everyone to like the videos. Watched another video here on YouTube that outlined how important it is for people to like the video. So please use that 3 seconds of time to use the mouse or your phone and click the like button, and share the videos out on social media and bring more folks into the live chat each and every week. And of course, if you subscribe, then you get the notifications and know when we're coming on live, because all the schedules between the three of us and Kevin, we don't always know when we can go live. So you need to subscribe and get the notifications. Todd's asking, I'll just throw it out. He had a couple general recruiting questions. One involves Damon Payne from Belleville and his recruitment. And also he lists a number of blue chip prospects there. We don't need to take them one by one, but just in regards to your thoughts about the probabilities of getting the majority of those guys.
I think Payne is maybe trending a little bit away from Ohio State right now, but like these guys, J.C. Latham, J.T. Tuamaloau, we'll say, and Emeka Bukwe, the receiver, and Jagger Burton. But like those first three guys right now in 24/7's own rankings are all top 10 players. And Ohio State already has 2 commits from 2 top 10 players in those rankings, and Donovan Jackson, who is 8 or 10 or something like that, and Jack Sawyer, who's in the top 5. So right now, with Latham and Tuimaloa and Emeka Bekwu, that's looking at half of the top 10 could possibly be Buckeyes, and then a few more beyond that as well, and Jagger Burton and I think Derek Davis there. But this is the time of year where everybody's always like, oh, if they get this guy, it never happens. But those first 3 guys all seem to be like leaning Ohio State's way, but you're still going to ask 2 guys from Washington to come all the way to Ohio State. Now, granted, they got G. Scott last year to do that. So it's not unheard of, but rarely do things go ideally in recruiting. And even if they get those 3, say the top 3 guys, who knows? They could end up being ranked in the top, they drop out of the top 50, drop out of the top 100. Now you're like, well, I guess it'll have to do. Although if there's no spring camps or no summer camps to re-rate players, like there may not be a whole lot of movement on the recruiting rankings for a while.
Yeah, I'm looking at the targets list here. JT Tui Malao from Eastside Catholic. I think that's the same school of G. Scott, and they're going to push really hard for him. And imagine putting him on one side and Jack Sawyer on the other. And what would that do for you there? Tony Grimes, a big-time cornerback out of Virginia. He's a top 10 guy. And Amika Egbuka from Washington as well, a wide receiver. To add, the idea that you would add more wide receivers on top of the 4 that you signed this past year is, again, Rich just keep getting richer and richer and richer. And, I don't know what to say. When you add top 10, top 25, top 50 players year after year after year, it's going to be hard to lose football games at that point. It's kind of, how do you not win games unless you just commit like 5 turnovers or something stupid? So I don't want to say it's foolproof, but it certainly helps when you have better, bigger, stronger, faster X's and O's. That's when you win football games.
Yep, you got the Jimmies and Joes in place. Then the X's and O's are easy to maneuver past that. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate the time. I hope everybody out there that watches us on a weekly basis understand that these guys have a ton to do, a lot going on, and they donate at least an hour to us each and every week to talk Ohio State football. So please check out the work of Steve Hellwagon on Bucknuts, Tony Gerdeman on the ozone.net. Guys, it's been a great discussion. We somehow come up with something to talk about that's interesting to at least me, and 85 on the line and about 5,000 to 6,000 that eventually tune in and get the content. So for anybody on the line right now who missed any of the discussion, the video will post in just about 30 to 45 minutes, something in that range. Go back and watch what you missed. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. Take care.
Have a good one.